I'm trying to achieve is the rounded part for my steering wheel. Now, having machined the octagonal piece, I'm now going to use a small piece for the centre jig. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to place one edge right up an edge of that piece of scrap material that I have, and then trace around for the shape of the jig. So now I'm about to cut out the centre part of my jig for the routering process, which will be next. I can cut this out with my handsaw using the bench hook that I used previously, but I'm going to use a drop saw. Of course, number one, safety gear. Lining that up. So now that I've cut the square, what I'm going to do now is cut my corners. Move this to 45. So now I'm just going to check if my jig will fit in where it's supposed to. There we go. Now, having marked the centre, all I need to do is drill the hole for the bolt. So I have an 8mm bolt, and I'm now going to choose 8mm drill bits. You can double check it by putting the bolt in the hole of the drill casing, make sure it works. If I choose a 7, for example, you will see that it doesn't fit. So the 8mm is the one that I'm going to go with. So now I'm ready to drill a hole in my template, attach it to my base, in order for me to be able to do the routering for my steering wheel. I will be referring to the T7 steering wheel routering guide. Vaughan is going to make the metal template that I need to attach to the router base in order to do the routering work. He will also make 3 round holes to position the router where I need it. Those holes will be 8mm. So I need an M8 bolt with the washer and the corresponding nut. The bolt itself will also have a shaft on it to allow the plate to spin around. What I'm going to do first, seeing as how it's all marked out in the centre, I'm going to give it a little centre punch with my little trusty nail. Or if you want to, you can use a proper centre punch. It's entirely up to you. Using a smaller drill bit, I'm then going to drill that out. But I don't want to drill a hole all over the place. So what I'm going to do now is use my little trusty bench hook that I made previously. And the smaller template can be held in place here, nice and neat. I will then change this over to my 8mm drill bit. I've done that one. Now the next one, I need to put a hole through my baseboard. Bit of scrap. Okay, so I've now got my board all nicely clamped so it won't spin around. I'm going to mark the centre again with my trusty little centre marker here, my nail and my little hammer. I then get my larger 8mm drill bit. So now I've done the hole, unclamped my little job, check the bolt, it fits, but because the bolt has a hex head, I need to make it fit flush with the baseboard so that it doesn't rock around when I'm doing all my routering work. Now, how I'm going to do that is simply mark out the shape using the chisel very carefully, taking out material as we go. Now, I'm just going to check the bolt. Oh, look at that. So now, I've done the recess required for my M8 bolt. We'll just fit that in there and give it a little tap. Beautiful, nice and flush. Turn him over, fit the template in, and that fits all nice and neat. And so now, what I need is the metal template from Vaughan. Now, Vaughan's going to make this template to suit the router that I have here. the base has been removed, so please check that on your own router in order to find the locating holes for the new metal template to fit on there. It is imperative that the holes that you have on your template match your router, and also that the distances of the locating holes to the centre of where your router cutter will be match the drawing that's been supplied.
Ezio's asked me to make a template or a jig for his router. It's template T7 for the base of the router so that we can do the steering wheel. The mounting points may vary depending on what type of router, brand, etc. that you have. The external may also vary depending also on your router and the application under which you're going to use it. So we're going to use mild steel, 3mm plate. We've cut our template out, we've overlaid it onto the steel. Just use some magnets to locate. The first thing we're going to do is our hole center, then our outside holes. Again, it's critical that we get these reference points, measurements correct. We're drilling the 3 large holes on the drill press for safety so that the job doesn't pick up. The smaller holes we can drill in the vise with just a cordless drill or a power drill. So this is for our router only. You may need to alter for yours. We've done our large hole saws, 20mm and 64mm. The last smaller diameter holes, which are 4 and 8mm, we can do with a cordless drill. We need to make sure we get this dead vertical, perpendicular to our piece, and hole centers have to be perfect. Hey mate. We're going to countersink these 4 holes to make sure we've got a nice flush surface for when we do the routing. Lastly, we're going to trim around the outside, power saw, guillotine, etc. And then we'll just linish around the outside to finish everything off. We've finished this now. We've just deburred it and taken any edges off. So now we can hand it over to Ezio.
I've now received the template from Vaughan and it fits perfectly for us to do our job. So what we need to do now is to place it on our router. As you can see, I've removed the base and it's unplugged. For safety, you should always unplug any tool that you're using prior to doing any adjustments. Now, what you need to do is to work out what the best orientation for this router is. Are you right-handed? Are you left-handed? Where's the switch on the router? Because in a case of an emergency, you need to be able to turn it off very quickly. It might be a thumb operated, it might be finger like this one, or a trigger, depending on the machine that you're using. So, I'm comfortable being right-handed, operating on this side. And as you can tell by this router, I have a handle here, but this one's been removed because as it's sitting there, I'm then going to hold my piece, position myself correctly, and operate in this manner. If you're left-handed, you might be on the other side. So adjust your machine accordingly. What I'm going to do now, having understood that I'm going to go in this direction, and with my screws that came out from the base plate, I'm now going to locate the screws and fit them in. As you can see, I've got my router template affixed to the router. Please make sure that the screw heads are nice and flush. It just makes it a lot easier for you to work over your job. So I'm now referring to my router guide, the T7 template here. Has all the steps in there that I need to go forward. And I've got my nice new router bits here. I'm going to be using a 13mm straight cutter, 19mm straight cutter, and also the larger rounding over cutter or cove cutter as you call it. So what I'm using is our 13mm cutter. These have the 12.7mm shank and I'm going to fit it into the router. So it's a matter of taking the collet off and the locking nut. It has a 2-stage collet inside, so therefore make sure it's reasonably tight when you're doing it all up. I'm fitting it in such a manner that it's going to be flush with the collet. because if I have to take the cutter out and refit it, I know exactly where to put it. Screw that back in, and that will now be tightened up with a spanner. I'm using my locking pin here to hold the locking nut in place, and with the appropriate spanner, I'm just tightening it up. Not too tight, but tight enough so it won't come undone. Some routers will have 2 spanners to tighten this up. So now I'm right to go. Got everything set. What I'm going to talk to you guys about now is safety. As you can appreciate, you're dealing with a high-speed machine that is quite dangerous, so you need to be very, very familiar with it and your job. The job for a start needs to be clamped down. As you can see, I've done so here. You don't want to be chasing it around your bench. I'd also like you to be very, very familiar with the machine. You need to know your on-off switches very quickly. You need to place this on the job and do a practice run. Stand properly. There's a lot to be said for standing correctly. Your balance has a lot to do with how you're going to hold the job in place. Because it's going to be bolted down, it will be very, very good and very safe for us to use. I'm now ready to do step 1, which is to cut the circumference of the little steering wheel. As you can see, I've got my 13mm cutter ready to go, and I've placed the template in hole C. And now I just want to secure that down by placing the washer and the nut. Nuts in place, nice and loose for us to rotate around. At all times, keep your fingers away from the cutters. Don't forget, we're now plugged in. I'm ready to go now, but what I want to do is show you how the depth stop works on this particular machine. So, as you can see, by pressing this button here, I can raise or lower my depth stop, and I have the option of doing what we call a micro adjustment. I'm now going to bring this adjustment all the way up as I'm not using it. If you are using this depth stop on a router, you need to use the locking lever once you've got your adjustments set. I'm actually going to use this part of the router, which allows me to raise and lower the machine at my convenience, and I don't need to lock anything off. So turn the router on, adjust this down, and as it lowers itself in there, we will start the process of routing. Don't forget, I'm doing 3 passes. All right, that's the first pass done. Now we'll repeat that process and we'll do it a little bit deeper. That's my second pass, and now obviously we repeat it again. Please make sure you take your time. Be careful now, because some of these pieces, as we get down to the bottom, may flick off, so your PPE needs to be on. What I want to explain now is, as you can tell, I finished the process, and that very last pass that we did, those of you that were observant will notice that I was going forward and then going backwards. The reason for that was breaking off the little pieces and giving them a chance to escape and get out of my way. You may have heard one of them got caught, but again, because the router is secure and I've got my personal protective equipment on, there was no drama. Step 2 explains that I need to use the next position, hole A, which is the closest one to the router base. I'm still using my 13mm cutter, but on this occasion we only go 14mm deep, so I do need to watch that. The reason for only going to that depth is that I need to transfer this and turn it over so that we can do another routing process on the other side. I'm now going to take the router plate off. Aha! We forgot something. A good woodworker will always unplug his tools so that no little accidents can happen. There we go. Now, I'm going to mark my job like that, so I know that this is going to come back here. I'm then going to take this little fellow out with my trusty tape measure You can set it to a 0 or 100, whatever you like. And I'm now going to mark 14 millimetres right there. So, placing that back, make sure it's nice and clean, into its rightful position. I'm now going to put it back into the C position. Bear with me, guys. The reason for that is I'm now going to plunge down and use this stop on this side. So, let's wind it down to the position that I want. Right, that's the depth that I want. And now using this mechanism, I'm going to block that into position and make sure it's, there we go. It clicked, and that's where I want it to be. Back to the top, place it in position A, finger tight, and I'm right to go. All I need now is to put on my personal protective equipment. Now I'm on to step 3. Step 3 shows me that I am going to use a 13mm radius cutter with no roller. That's important to do the outer radius and the inner radius of my little steering wheel. Now with this set that I've purchased, my 13mm radius cutter actually has a roller on there. So I need to remove that roller because I don't have the depth on the inside or the outside to complete that full radius that I require. The simple step is to remove the centre holding screw, and with that I take the roller off. Now you will see there's a small nib. I need to modify that. Ready for step 3, which our little guide tells me that we're going to go around and do the outer round in position C, which is the furthest away from the router base. And I've got my depth stop set to 13mm. Away we go. I've now completed the routering process for the outer side of our steering wheel. So now I have to move from position C to position A, and that will then do the inside. You have to note and be aware that you'll also be routering this side of the ring as well, but don't worry too much about that. We need to concentrate and make sure that the inner side of the circle is done. At this point, I'd like to mention something. If you noticed, I was going in the opposite direction with the cutter. I felt that it was more comfortable pulling the router towards me, whereas on the outside I was pushing the router away from me. You'll find that because I'm working on two edges, that might be more comfortable and best for you. Well, that's step 3 complete. As you can see, it's nice and rounded. I've got a tiny little ridge line on mine, but I'll sand that out later by hand, not a concern. So, step 4 tells me I need to flip this over, and on only one of the halves, I need to set up using a straight 13mm cutter and plunge it to 3.5mm to cut out the slot for the metal plate ring. The thickness of my material is 17mm. So now I have to take into consideration that I'm going to be thicknessing this down to 13mm. So that's 4mm that I need to take off. In order to fit the metal ring on this half, I need to then go another further 3.5mm. So in total, I need to set my router with the 13mm straight cutter to a depth of 7.5mm. I now have a gauge ready to go that I can adjust the cutter, and as you can tell, it's unplugged, so we're being safe. And I've now zeroed it in, and lucky for me, it's magnetised, so I can just hands-free start setting the gauge and bringing the cutter out to the depth I require. And I think that will be just fine. Now that I've got my depth on the cutter organised, what I'm going to do is set up my depth stop. So that's there, set to go, and then I can now release it, bring it back to 0, place the router in position, and please note, for the centre groove for the steel ring, I'm using position B. Please go slow, take your time, because we're getting to a critical point here now. It'd be a shame to spoil it. You will have noticed through that process, I did it in 4 goes, taking it nice and easy, adjusting it down slowly. I don't want to take out too much material and have a risk of it breaking on me. Okay, step 5 tells me I need to set my router up, ready for thicknessing, to bring my material down to 13 mil. Depending on what size thickness you have of your material, you need to adjust your cutter to suit. On mine, I've got my depth stop set to take off 4 mil of material, and that will then see me finish up at 13 mil. Using a 19 mil cutter in position C, and then I'm going to swap over to position B and do the centre routing up. Now I'm going to move over to position B. You may have noticed that I've brought the router up so that the cutter doesn't interfere or damage the material. Okay, we're at step 6 now, which is the final pass to complete the task of routering out half of our steering wheel. Now, given that I have 17 mil thick material to deal with, I only have 4 mil depth of cut to go, I'm going to do it all in one pass, and then that way I'll alleviate the risk of any breakage and so forth. If you have thicker material, you are more than welcome to do it in 2 passes. Just check before you do it. I was very fortunate this time. As you can see from here, it just barely broke through. It's paper thin. I can clean all that up by hand. I am not concerned. Well, there it is, folks. We've done the first half of our steering wheel. As you can see, it's beautifully rounded over. A little bit of hand sanding will tidy it up. The back side of it has the groove in there for the metal centre that has to be fitted in. Our next procedures is to do the same all over again, but we don't have to do the groove. Now that I've completed my 2 halves, as you can see, one has the groove for the metal centerpiece of our steering wheel, and our top half is nice and flat. If there are a few lumps and bumps, you'll need to smooth those out. We've got a few processes to go through here yet in regards to sanding and making sure that it's all fitting correctly like it should. But what I want to do now is take you into another routering process. If you don't want to use the octagonal method like I've done here in order to alleviate any grain direction, I'm now going to show you how to do the same routering processes out of a solid piece of timber.